Good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to Great Cities Institute. So we're very pleased today that we have with us Chico from the Back of the Yard Neighborhood Council, Emilio Carrasquillo from the Neighborhood Housing Services, and Henry Cervantes from the Resurrection Project. All three wonderful organizations, all three very busy men, and we are very, very appreciative and very honored that you were here with us. So first of all, Chico is from the Back of the Yard Neighborhood Council. Their mission is, first of all, they're a community organization, and their mission is to enhance the general welfare of all residents, organizations, and businesses in their service area. They accomplish this by integrating social service and economic development programs. Their motto is, and always has been, we the people will work out our own destiny. Love it. Chico is president and CEO of the Back of the Yard Neighborhood Council Services. We also have then with us, Emilio Carrasquillo, who is with the Neighborhood Housing Services, and their mission is to create opportunities for people to live in affordable homes, to improve their lives and strengthen their neighborhoods. Emilio is the neighborhood director. He joined NHS in March of 2005 as a loan originator for Neighborhood Lending Services, which is a licensed nonprofit residential mortgage lending arm. Emilio was promoted to the position of neighborhood director of Back of the Yards and Garfield Boulevard Neighborhood Housing Services in February of 2007. He is a recipient of the Christy Fidelis Award from the Archdiocese of Chicago. Finally, Henry Cervantes from the wonderful Resurrection Project. Well, they're all wonderful organizations. The Resurrection Project's mission is to build relationships and challenge people to act on their faith and values to create healthy communities through organizing, education, and community development. Henry Cervantes is a community organizer, safety organizer, and between the three of them, we are very excited to learn more about what is going on in Back of the Yards. You don't really know Chicago unless you know the Back of the Yards. So with that, we will begin with you, Mr. Chico.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I totally agree with that statement. If you want to learn something about Chicago, its ethnic roots, you have to start in communities like the Back of the Yards. The Back of the Yards area, I'll start with, was annexed by the city of Chicago back in 1889 from town called Lake. Not exactly sure of the politics, but I'm sure they did it at the time because they wanted better services, they wanted lower taxes, and they wanted all the amenities that could come from being part of a bigger organization. So the Back of the Yards community, which I guess people say originated around 1850 or circa, was probably the hub of employment for a lot of immigrant communities. It was the port of entry for many immigrant communities, especially the Eastern European. It was predominantly a Slavic community, and it was a draw for many of those folks from across the pond because it had opportunities, and job opportunities mostly. The migration of the Hispanic population began in the early 1900s, around 1910, 1920, and that's about the time my grandfather came to the Back of the Yards. So I know it from personal experience from what I've been told, not that I lived it, I'm not that old, but from what I've been told and from what I've learned from my family. It was a very, very interesting time that my parents grew up in. There were different enclaves, mostly Slavic, when they moved to the community. My father was Mexican, my mother was Lithuanian, and they lived on different blocks. They were segregated by ethnic blocks back in the day. And they came here predominantly for, like everyone else before them, for an opportunity to work. My grandfather, like so many others, came up on the railroad, worked his way up, and found employment at the stockyards, the Union stockyards. And that's what happened. And through the 60s and 70s, the Hispanic population began to grow. The European population diminished somewhat. And unfortunately for so many, in 1970, the stockyards closed and moved, which created a bit of a recession. And then at that point, from what I read, it was predominantly Hispanic and Mexican American community. The organization transition now to. The Back of the Yards Neighborhood Council, I'd like to say, is the oldest, but I should caution to say, it is one of the oldest not-for-profits in the country. Established in 1939 by a very colorful organizer by the name of Saul Alinsky, known then and in some circles today as the godfather of organizing, had such storied pupils as our President, Barack Obama, and Cesar Chavez. They both learned their ways of organizing from Saul Alinsky, who was a University of Chicago student, or graduate, I should say. So back in 1939, when this organization was established, it was established largely in part to combat the working conditions in the stockyards. Most people would say we partnered with the first real collaboration with union and community organization. So in 39, there was, as I said, a different population and different issues. But the reality is today in 2015, many of the issues still remain the same. We still serve an immigrant population, however, it happens to be mostly Mexican American, and there is still a low-income concern. Back in the day when this organization began, it was to address those poverty concerns. And today, we have almost a 30% poverty rate in the Back of the Yards, which is about three times higher than the national average. So a lot of the things that were done back then are still needed today, only with different constituency and with different methods. I'd like to talk a little bit about the population today. There's about 57% of the population is Latino. Now, you can skew these numbers depending on the boundaries that you choose to look at the population, but I'm looking at an area that we traditionally call 43rd Street on the north to 55th Street on the south, and Halsted on the east to Western on the west. So my statistics relate to that geographic area. 57% Latino, 29% African American, 10% white, and we guesstimate there are about 20,000 kids in the community that are under the age of 18. So it's a very young community. As I said before, about 29% of our population is below poverty, 3 times the national average. That said, there are about 25% of the households in the Back of the Yards that earn over $50,000 a year. The thing to note there, the tricky thing, is that a household can be defined as 5, 4, 3, 6 income earners. And that's quite common in the Back of the Yards in our housing stock, which I'm sure you'll hear more from when Emilio speaks. The median income is about $25,000 today. While the population of the county and the city has declined, this population of the Back of the Yards has remained stable, and the Mexican American population has increased somewhat. At our organization, we, as I said earlier, have evolved to deal with a different constituency, but most of what we do is economic development and social services. There's been a change in many regards in our community, but we are working today to combat still some of the same things that were combated in the past. There are shifting demographics, there are challenging economics, but we do have some things that we are really proud of and looking forward to. Today, the community boasts of the greatest decrease in crime in the 9th District, especially in the Back of the Yards, of about 50% as it relates to homicides and as it relates to shootings. Now, that's a bit dubious because our crime rate is so high, but yet we're going in the right direction. We're trending positively. Our schools, there are about 6 public grammar schools in the Back of the Yards that have all been on the increase. One of our schools is a number 1. I believe there's only one that is a 3. I think they changed the rating system to 5 now. But I think one of our schools is a 5, the rest are in the middle. But they're all improving with great principles. There is retail development that we can speak about. The building, the anchor of the retail corridor on 47th and Ashland, which was known as the Goldblatt store, has been bought and redeveloped. The first floor is an electronics and furniture store, and the top 4 floors will be an assisted senior living facility. There's a Marshalls and a Walmart that have recently moved in, and a Checkers, and all kind of the retail strip on 47th and Dayton has 100% occupancy. So those are the things that are to look forward to. But the most important thing that I can speak of today that would give hope and rise to a good generation of kids with opportunities and families with opportunities is the new high school. It's a $100 million plus investment made into our community. It's not just about the bricks and mortar. It was a symbol to this community that it was worth investing in. And it gives moms and dads an opportunity to send their kids on foot to a safe and great high school. It's only in its second year of operation. It's still developing its reputation, but right now it's sterling. It's a IB, partially an IB, a wall-to-wall school, so we're very proud of it, and I think that's going to do wonders to stabilize the community. And as I said, it is probably the single biggest factor in hope for the future of this community. So there's so much more I can say, but I yield now to my partner, and I hope to answer some of your questions as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. As stated before, my name is Emilio. I'm the Neighborhood Director for Neighborhood Housing Services. We run a homeownership center out of that area, in 47th and Henry. NHS has had a presence in that community since 1995. I began with them in 2005, as stated before, as a loan originator in that community. I used to service that community 1 day a week. I also service South Chicago, Chicago Long, as well as our central office. I fell in love with backyards. It just had this sort of warm feeling, if you will. The people that were there, the businesses, anywhere you walked into a business, you were welcomed. People on the street said hi. A lot different atmosphere than what you're used to in the city. And I grew up and lived in Humboldt Park. It felt kind of similar to when I was growing up in areas like that. It was so warm and welcoming. And as I went getting to know the people there, again, that closeness just reverberated with me. And I had the opportunity to apply for the position of director when it opened up. At first I didn't want it. I was so happy doing what I was doing. And the director there said, I'm going on maternity leave. You should apply for this position. I think you'd be a great director. And I said, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I don't need that much. But looking back at it, I'm glad I rethought the position. She was gone. There was no director there for about 6 months. People that weren't staffed in the office sort of left, taken somewhere else. And there was nobody at the office. So when I became the director, I had to sort of reignite all those relationships again and just start meeting people again and saying, we're back, I'm here now. Biggest complaint was we go to the office for help, nobody's there. I said, I'm there now. And like Craig said, it's a great community. There's a lot of good things going on in that community. I always tell people it's a community where there's not a food desert, it's a food oasis. No matter where you go, there's restaurants, there's food stores, there's barbershops, there's beauty salons, there's, not that I need that, there's clothing stores, shoe stores, all those types of businesses, anything within a walking distance that you would want. There's parks, there's 3 parks, Cornell Square, Davis Park, Sherman Park. As Craig said, there's a great, vibrant business community there. Great churches, schools, they're improving day to day. However, the housing stock is still old. There's a lot of older housing stock in there. Majority of homes, I would say north of 49th Street, are frame homes. Older homes, and it used to be known as Packing Town because that's where a lot of the workers used to also live. They used to work in the Union Stockyards. As a consequence of that, you walk into some of these homes and you have some bedrooms that are maybe 8 by 10, no closet, which we describe as being having a functional obsolescence. It doesn't work in today's standards. Today you get a bedroom, say you have a bed, you have some dressers, everything. You can't fit them in those bedrooms. So it doesn't. A lot of those homes do not conform to today's living. And that's one of the issues that we see all the time in the community. Also, the homeownership rate is very low. It's between 38% and 39%. It's like 38.5%. So if you look at the fact that there's a lot of absentee landlords, there's a lot of homes also as a result of that have neglected maintenance. There's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of opportunities, I call it, because that's how I see it. There's opportunities for improvement. Since we've been there, we've done a lot of home improvement loans. We've done a lot of refinances, getting people out of predatory lending loans and high interest rates where they couldn't qualify for something with low interest rate. We've done that. There's still a lot more work to do. And foreclosures has been something else that in the last few years, as we all know, the whole nation went through crisis. Back in the years was affected just as much. Being a low to moderate income community, the figures were high, not as high as other communities, luckily, but still high enough to make an impact on the property values. A lot of the property values now are low and lower than the average in the city. you know, they can range anywhere from as low as $20,000 for a foreclosed property, and as high as maybe $100,000, $120,000, $130,000 for something that's out. So there's a big range. And if you look at, depending on the website that you look at for real estate, I use Trulia because that would I can narrow it down to the actual back of the yards boundaries versus other websites that have the community of New City, which is what back of the yards is located in. You're looking at an average listing price in the last week of $77,768. So that's pretty low as far as city averages is concerned for a single family. But again, foreclosures, if you're looking at the stats back in 2005, there was maybe 2.4% of the properties in foreclosure. As recently as 2013, 31.5% of those properties were in foreclosure. So income is something that affects the housing. Again, having a lot of home housing stock is an issue. What I see as opportunities and things that we can work with is in the home improvement side. We offer a home improvement loan where we can offer someone money to fix their properties at a low interest rate, regardless of credit score. So it's always been an impediment to improving their products and getting a loan. We can do that. Again, it's just something where we have to continually keep working, and I see a lot of potential for back of the yards. It's a great community. Like I said, I love it there. I always tell people I live in back of the yards and I sleep in Home Park because it's been most of the time back of the yards. Luckily, I have an understanding wife, so. but yeah, it's a great community. And if you ever get a chance to go by there, please do.
Yeah. So, hello again. My name is Henry Cervantes. I'm an organizer for the Resurrection Project. So I'm very happy to be here today, to be invited as a part of this lecture series at the Great Cities Institute. And I think it's an important conversation to talk about back of the yards. As a changing community, it's evolving community. And so I'm very excited that we get to talk about one of the very special communities in Chicago. And so my work with the Resurrection Project is in the organizing department. So I'm out in the community a lot. But just to tell you a little bit about who we are, we started in 1990. We started by a group of residents in Pilsen and priests who brought together some seed money, and we passed the hat around, we collected about $30,000 back in 1990. And now today we've transformed that to over $250 million in different forms of investment in the community. We've expanded our work into back of the yards, and we're very excited to be a part of that. To tell you a little bit about myself, oh, and by the way, today, this year we're turning 25 years old, the organization, and our goal for the next 5 years is to do more than what we've done in the last 25 years. And so we're very excited to get engaged and continue to push forward the struggle for peace and stability in back of the yards. And so most of my work, I grew up in Pilsen, a little village, and I find that back of the yards is very similar, right? As Mr. Chico mentioned, right? It's always been a port of entry for immigrant families. And if you look at in the 19th century, when it was German and Irish immigrant families that were living there, that changed in the 20th century with the Lithuanians, right? Community. And so the Czech community, and so now it's still a living community, but it's a new population. It's the Mexican immigrant community in Chicago, and so I think that the parish life is still there. The community is back in the yards. It's a very special place for me. I too have fallen in love with back of the yards. I learned a lot as an organizer, working with the families on the ground. Most of our work in back of the yards is in the area of housing also, and we know that the housing stock is very old. We're looking at buildings that are about 100 years old, and more or less. And what we try to do is try to provide fair and decent housing to immigrant families. What we found out in the last couple of years is that the infrastructure is so outdated that sometimes, you know, some of the apartments have been, you know, you got multiple apartments within what would be considered one apartment today. And we see the living conditions of our families there. So we kind of want to help and provide fair and decent housing. So in Back of the Yards, the Resurrection Project, through a program known as NSP2, we were able to acquire $13.5 million and invest it in the community and buy lots and buy homes and provide decent housing for our families in backyards. And so we're very happy about that. We're very excited. We look forward to continuing our work, right, in providing a decent infrastructure for immigrant families here in the Southwest Side. So we've done some work in backyards. We know and understand that the issues are immediate and they still need a lot of attention. Part of our work is not only in housing but also in education. So we're working right now with 3 local elementary schools, trying to engage parents in being more involved in their children's lives at school. We talked about housing. We also have an immigration component. We do a lot of advocacy and organizing work in backyards as it relates to immigration. And also we believe in childcare. You know, a lot of our families are working class people. And so we have a building that we actually work with our partners and they run the facility to provide childcare for families in our community. There's huge needs. The issue of violence has come up. We know that crime rates are down, but we know that even one shooting is too much, right? From an organizer every day, or even families on the block, they know that one shooting is too many. So we're working right now on expanding our safety efforts in backyards and helping to organize residents to combat the issue. Wanted to mention one more thing. Also, the voter turnout. It's a shame that in Back of the Yards, we have one of the lowest voter turnout rates than any other place in the city. We're up there in terms of low voter turnout. And so a lot of our work also is to educate people who are eligible to vote, to get them out to the polls. Right? So voter turnout and safety work is what we're looking to expand. But one thing I do want to mention is that as an organizer, you know, I've learned a lot from the families in backyards, and that's been very inspirational. If I can put backyards into one word, it would have to be the perseverance. That's how I would describe backyards. The people, you know, going through their day-to-day lives, just trying to, you know, the perseverance of the people in backyards is amazing. And that's what drives my work. And at the Resurrection Project, we try to make sure that we also follow through, right, with some of the work that our leaders there are engaging us in. So I'll leave it at that, and I guess we'll from there.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. What are the boundaries that you all are talking about?
New city, I guess, would be, it's different when, depending on who you ask. I would say 55th to 39th maybe, and Halsted to Western. So that encompasses 6 automatic wards, by the way. So another issue, I'm sure Henry was touching on it.
Yeah, I didn't want to go too much into it, but the community is very divided politically.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
So you say, so southern boundary, northern boundary is 43rd?
Well, residentially, I would say 43rd, but technically it goes to 39th, but that's mostly industrial.
Yeah, industrial, yeah. And then the northern boundary is 54th, you said?
It's the southern boundary. would be
Southern boundary then from Austin.
55th.
Right.
Careful.
55th, because I used to live over there, so I do have several questions, but I would.
When did the stockyards close?
1970.
And people now are working where?
The stockyards now, what used to be the Union Packing House and slaughterhouses, it was a vibrant industrial park. Companies like Aramark and Tyson and Vantage employ about, I hesitate to throw a number out there because they're very secretive with their employment numbers, but about 5,000 people work out of that place. Now, not many of them, or not enough of them, live in the back of the areas, because the sad reality is that once you get a decent job, in the past and probably somewhat true today, you move west.
Look at back of the yards down, and you see the industrial park. You see a business like Tester Produce, which is 100% LEED certified. And if you look at this plant, you always identify it because they have a huge wind turbine that thing generates electricity enough to power his plant. He's got a half-barrel well for vegetation. That water is drained and used and filtered and used into the washrooms. You got solar panels in the parking lot. You plug in an electric car for you. 100%. And he's been all over the nation just talking about what he's done.
That's not the plant?
Right?
The plant?
The plant.
No,
That's the Tesla Brokers.
Oh, okay.
The plant Chicago is started also, it's sort of a business incubator, if you will. They have aquaponic farming. They raise tilapia fish and they raise vegetables. And that is a whole ecosystem by itself. You have another, they raise bees on the roof, produce honey. They have a cheese factory in there near they have a bakery in there. They have a microbrewery that's coming in. They have raising shrimp in the lower portion of the basement. I mean, you walk in there, they give tours of it if you ever have a chance to take one of those tours. I haven't actually do it, it's fantastic, you know. And you see businesses like that, so innovative, in a place like back in the years that has such a rich history. And then you look at the old and the new, and it's kind of two sides of the coin.
And that was going to be my next question. How much interaction is there between the new and the old?
There's, it depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at the residential portion, probably not as much as it would be with the business side. Craig's organization runs 4 SSAs, special service areas in the city, and there's a lot of interaction with them, of course. Businesses interact with each other. As far as Plant Chicago is concerned, they're trying to reach out into the community, also to get participation. They have a farmer's market that's there on the Saturdays, I believe, one Saturday a month, if I'm not mistaken. And they open up the plant to all the businesses there. They have sort of their own, it's like a sale day, I don't recall it. I believe it's the first Saturday. I want to say the first Saturday or the last Saturday, I'm not sure. And they, you can go in there and buy their products and get a tour of the place. So they're trying to incorporate themselves a little bit more in the community. So it depends on where you're looking at.
So back to the question too around jobs. So there's some folks then who are working in things that are in the industrial park. Are people leaving the neighborhood to come downtown? If so, what's the transportation like? Where else are people working?
It's hard to determine that, but I know that a lot of the people that work in the backyards, it used to be solely, almost a huge percentage of people that live in the backyard work in the stockyards. That obviously has changed. It was unskilled labor, semi-skilled labor, and that's why people came here. They didn't need much training and education to get a job. Now it's hard to tell because we're a very diverse community. We work in all industries, all fields, so there's really no one particular industry I would submit.
Is there a lot of unemployment?
There is. We have a higher unemployment rate than, I have that statistic, than most, but that is hard to tell because we haven't even touched on this yet, but there is a huge population of undocumented folks that live in the backyards. So those statistics are hard to measure. And there's the underground economy, as they call it. So what happens when you're undocumented, you become an entrepreneur. We're a very entrepreneurial community. You start your own business, some way, somehow. So those statistics are a little bit hard to handle.
I've got more questions, but why don't we open it up for anybody who has questions?
What wards are in the back of the yards?
All right, I'll start with 15, 20, 16, 11, what am I missing? 12.
That's impressive that you can run.
Okay. So, follow up. So you guys actually border Inglewood, correct?
Pardon?
Yes.
You border Inglewood.
West End.
Yes. And then, because when I looked over to Sherman Park, so I looked over probably 20-something years ago, probably over 30 years ago. And then Sherman Park was mostly an African-American park, and I heard you mention it earlier. Has it changed since that time?
It's still mostly African American. There is a little migration. It is mostly African American still in that area. There is, as you know, that area has been devastated a lot with those foreclosure numbers that I gave you. Mostly affected south of 49th Street.
Right.
So anything, especially south of 51st Street, there's a lot of empty lots, there's a lot of vacant homes. There's a lot of problems in that area. Opportunities, of course, but some issues. And now we're seeing that a lot of the homes that have been boarded up are being bought by a lot of Latino families. And those are cash sales. So there's no way of tracking, water, real risk, it's all cash sales.
So what type of organizations that are like an African neighborhood are similar to what you guys are doing? What type of interaction do you guys ever have with those organizations?
In Inglewood?
Just given the proximity of the fact that you guys share a ward, so you have to share city services. So there has to be some form of interaction just because of that. So,
Well, if I can chime in here, last night I was at Cornell Square Park, and I attended the park. There's a committee out of Cornell Square Park that makes decisions on programs, outreach, and I saw something that really kind of struck me because you don't see that often enough. The committee was made of African American families and Latino families. And I found myself helping to translate, right? And thankfully, they always have translation there. But there is community building that's taking place. We just don't see it enough, but it's there. At Cornell Square Park, we do have a very intentional African American and Latino kind of coalition building that's taking place there. On April 25th, Saturday, the Latino community is known as Dia del Niño. In English, that's Day of the Child. African American families and Latino families are going to be hosting like a festival at the park. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Cornell Square Park, but it's more often than not, it's known for the place where we had that shooting recently, where multiple people were shot. But they're working there to actively engage the community. And it's something that, it's a shame that the news doesn't cover those stories, right? What's taking place before and after an incident. But there is very intentional community building that's taking place in backyards between African Americans and Latinos.
the reason why I asked is because I'm actually going to be doing work in the Inglewood neighborhood, because I live in Inglewood now. And so, given what you guys are doing, so in some ways, I think it's a good way to actually, communicate, in both neighborhoods. And that would help bring down crime too, because it actually gives more opportunity for people like that. So that's what I was looking to.
There's an organization called Teamwork Inglewood, I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
I'm shooting that called Inglewood Votes. And we're collaborating with them this Saturday to, as we have a forum for the 15th Ward Aldermanic candidates, the two candidates that are going off. But it's the first time I can remember collaborating with them in Brighton Park. Maybe it's a little bit to the west. Maybe not pertinent for this conversation. But it's been a wonderful collaboration. Very vendors and so we're starting to work together on some of those initiatives. In the summer, we try to do things at all the parks. You mentioned that park. Cornell is probably the only park of the three in the area that is integrated, so to speak. If you can use that word. Davis Square is predominantly Hispanic, not all Hispanic. Sherman is predominantly African American, and Cornell is probably the only one that is integrated.
Although I got to play in Sherman Park when I was younger on the weekends, so that was closer to my grandma's house, and we had to go out like 4 or 5 blocks, west if you wanted to go to Cornell Park, but we would do both. Yep.
So everyone mentioned about the housing stock that is pretty old and back at the yards. But then again, there's programmings for new housing coming up. Is that correct? Did I get that wrong, or that you guys were talking about earlier?
There's some investment going on
from
private investors. As far as the city investment, they used to have a program called Homes for Chicago. The last project they built was back in 2008.
Okay.
So if you look at those homes, what they did is instead of scattered sites, one here, one there, they just took a whole square block and built homes, 28 homes. And if you pass by those homes today, they're right on 54th and Morgan, and they look exactly like the day they were built. You can see the pride of home ownership. We participated in that project, and it's remarkable when you see the pride of home ownership that takes place in something like that.
All right, and well, this question has at least a second question, which would be for the people that are undocumented in that neighborhood or in the area. How easy is it for them to become homeowners or be able to rent or get any type of aid from the government to pay for their housing?
There's no aid from the government for them to get because they're undocumented. They're not
Right.
citizens, of course. But there are programs. There's what's called an ITIN loan. An ITIN is an individual tax identification number, which is obtained from the IRS, so that when they work here in this country, they can report taxes, of course. With that, there's two lenders. Our lender, Enable Lending Services, does loans for that, and so does Second Federal. They're a credit union. They were bought out by Self-Help Credit Union. TRP works very closely with them. They're the only two lenders right now that I know of in the city that can do those type of loans. So they are able to get homes. The problem is getting them qualified for those programs. One of the things that we're doing now at my homeownership center is embarking on a financial capability program, which is basically teaching them how the credit system works. So I've got people that come to the workshops and they have no clue that there's credit bureaus that exist that track everything you buy and everything that you take on credit. There's just no knowledge of it. I mean, there's people here that born and raised in this country that don't have an understanding of that, let alone someone who's an immigrant from a different community. So one of the things that we've embarked on is teaching them that process. We also offer first-time buyer classes, which teaches them the process of purchasing a home, what's involved. Because what we've seen in the past with all these foreclosures, nationwide, to bounce back, there's all type of government programs that will get your loan modification and try to help you avoid that foreclosure, but nobody was addressing the rest of the issues, which is the rest of the credit. How do you manage your money? You can ask the bank for a modification because you're having an issue paying your loan, but when sometimes we sit down and look at their entire financial picture, they don't have a mortgage problem. They got a great mortgage, a great loan, a good interest rate. They just have all these other credit issues, which is eating up all their money. Now they don't have enough money to pay their bank. So we're letting them know that, it's not a bank's problem to solve that issue for you. You need to learn how to manage your credit. And that's one of the things that NHS has embarked on last year. So we're part of a Neighbors America pilot program that's working on that right now.
So how do they build credit if they don't have a social security number? So the credit building.
There's banks that'll open up a savings account with that ITIN number.
Okay.
A lot of times it depends on, some are using social security numbers that are not theirs, but with that ITIN number, there's places that will give them some type of loan. We can always help them establish some type of credit. It could be locally. A lot of times they can use alternative credit. It doesn't have to be from the credit report itself. Alternative credit would mean something like show me proof that you paid your rent on time for the last year. Show me you paid your phone bill, your car insurance, your car payment. Show proof of 1 year of on-time payments. That's alternative credit. And a lot of times that's being used.
But make no mistake about it, we haven't figured out what the rest of the country hasn't figured out. It's a federal issue that needs to be addressed. And it just unfortunately it's highlighted in our community because we have such a large population of undocumented folks.
Can I say another hand?
Yeah, so something a lot of community organizations struggle with that do community economic development is the balance between promoting economic growth and then also being anti-gentrification. So my question for Resurrection Project and for the Neighborhood Council is, to what extent are your organizations anti-gentrification, if any at all? And how do you balance doing community economic development while simultaneously trying to sort of not displace neighbors and things like that?
Well, I think part of what we approach the issue of the community development aspect holistically. So we know that there's been foreclosures in our communities, right? And so we do provide foreclosure counseling foreclosure prevention, basic education on how to be a homeowner, because a lot of people are not educated on how to take care of their properties. Part of what we do is, we believe in responsible development, meaning that we want to educate and retain people from the community to stay in those communities and thrive in those communities. And so we have over 16 properties in backyards that we rent. We also sell housing or houses and engage those community members. We have many families who've come through our ranks in the organization or our partners, and we want to make sure that they stay. Unfortunately, what happens in a lot of communities like back in the yards, you have people who are able to earn a little bit more income, they leave, and they move to another place. But we know that if people keep doing that, the cycle of the issues in the communities are going to continue. So we try to retain those families. But I think to answer your other question, we believe in responsible development, keeping the communities from the communities to stay in those communities and thrive. And we have a lot of programs to ensure that they stay there. We are looking into new developments in backyards to serve the families that have made it their home.
The irony too here is that we're sitting in one of your facilities, University of Illinois, which was the sole biggest factor for the gentrification in Pilsen. And just to give you today's snapshot, I talked to Raul the other day, said an empty lot in Pilsen goes for about $90,000 to $100,000. An empty lot, vacant. In the back of the yard, it's $5,000 if you could, or less. Most times less. That said, that makes you ripe for development. So you're right. It's never too soon to concern yourself about gentrification, because we think we're dealing with so many other issues like crime and underemployment and economic poverty and low-income earners. You lose sight of what is right around the corner, potentially. So it's a good point. We haven't figured out how to deal with it yet. We're going to have to work. I know there's some legislation in the city council, and I know there's some other anti-gentrification initiatives. One was called Sister Andy. We have a nun in the back there at Holy Cross who keeps us in check.
Yes.
And warns us of gentrification because she came from and lived through it. Mm-hmm. But right now, the leakage that we are concerned with in our buy and our spending power is mostly electronics and mostly furniture and home furnishings in places like Home Depot, even though it's just right on Western. That leakage of the spending going out of the community, it's going to be difficult to tie that to, we try to recapture some of that money, but the more money you recapture, then it becomes, again, more concern for gentrification. The more income we make, the more property values go up. And we've got our eye on the developers. There's a lot of guys, especially now with the land bank that the county oversees and the lot project from the city, it's going to be very easy to obtain a lot of lots for no money. You can hold out to the land bank then until you're ready to develop until the price goes up. So we've got our eye on. I think from my perspective, the fair answer, the honest answer is haven't figured it out yet. Because we haven't had to deal with it yet, so what we're thinking about.
That's one of the things that we've found that a lot of the properties, as I was referring to before, south of 51st Street, that have been boarded up and foreclosed on, are being bought by investors, and they're just sitting out there. Right. Which doesn't help the issue, because as an organization that wants to revitalize and stabilize the community, that's sort of counterproductive to what we want. We want to see families in those homes. We want to see those homes occupied, so that can spur more development in those other empty lots. But if they remain vacant, it just sort of stagnates.
One last thing, there is that lots program that's going on right now through the city where the empty lot or vacant lot is, I think the first consideration is given to the neighbor, if I'm not mistaken. So if we can encourage that type of development, then they encourage their relative or friend to buy, and then you keep it, potentially par with what the community can afford.
I was invited actually went to the Home Depot probably a month ago.
To the Home Depot?
On 49. And I noticed you guys have a new library there too on 47.
Well, it's part of the high school. It's
so
the
that's
library
where
within the high school.
Because it's really nice. I looked at it. It's a really nice building.
That's actually the high school.
That's the high school?
Yeah, and the libraries, the mayor came up with a solution because the community is one of the few communities in the city that doesn't have a standalone library. There's no money in the library system. broke, et cetera, he incorporated the library within the building.
Is that a public school or charter school?
Public school. That's
Is it
the
the
faculty
pub-
arts, public, CPS.
Does the public have access to the library?
Yes, Chicago Public Library.
The unfortunate thing is that the students don't really, the students have to leave the high school building and walk around and enter through the library. But that's being worked on.
They're not sure what books are anyway,
How many students actually is in next?
Well, it's only populated now for freshmen and sophomore, and there are about 250 per class, so it's about 500 right now, but when it's at capacity, maybe 1,000, 1,200.
So it's gonna be expanding?
Predominantly, but there's kids, it's also a part of this IB, which is open to the city. So there are applicants coming to that school from around the state.
Okay.
You mentioned leakage earlier, and so sometimes part of the leakage can occur with things like the Walmarts and the Marshalls and so on, because they take their profits someplace else and don't necessarily circulate it. But sometimes you also need some of that activity to be anchors for other kinds of things. So I'm wondering how much of your efforts have been put into trying to build a small business sector and the local business sector in your area.
Well, we manage an SSA there. People think there's a lot more money than there is to do with it. So we focus on some of the basics like graffiti removal, bus transportation for our seniors and shoppers within there. When I was referring to leakage, I was talking about the spend that goes outside the community. You were referring to profits coming outside the community? Sorry.
Well, either, I mean, it's really both, right? In other words, it's the money that gets spent, is it being circulated within the community or does it leave? And so a lot of times if it's being spent in a local business, it's more likely to then to be circulated within that community.
The unfortunate truth is that a lot of the small businesses are not able to compete with the Marshalls and the Walmarts and people like that. The businesses that we referred to earlier are those that are boutique-ish and can create their own niche. It's unfortunate unfortunate, I should say, that as you mentioned, it's a food destination. The Weddos, that's the name of the store, that can compete with the neighborhood Walmart, which is a grocery store. That's a unique situation, though. In most cases, it's difficult. First of all, everyone drives now, everyone has access to transportation, so you go to a mall or you go downtown. Some of that leakage has been difficult to capture. We are a food destination, but yet people need to go buy their computer.
So what about transportation? What transportation access is there?
Bus route on Ashland, bus route on 42nd Street. The L is at 49th and Western.
Which line is that on?
That's the orange line.
That's something else.
You can take 47th Street down to the red line, which is right by the expressway. There's bus routes on, as Craig said, Damon, Western, Ashland, 47th, 51st. There's different ways of getting there. I mean, there's no way you could say, oh, I couldn't get there. It's not an excuse.
By the way, I think every house it's a mandatory that every home in the backyard has to have 5 cars.
I think.
Also,
We're trying to make it.
Yeah, one more.
Go ahead.
What about 47th and Ashland? Is that going to be coming back soon, or is it?
It's coming back right now. The anchor, as I mentioned earlier, was Goldet's, which
Right.
closed up several years ago, a couple decades ago. The first floor has been reopened as by a store called FAMSA. It's on the Fortune 100 list. It's a corporation out of Mexico. They sell electronics and home furnishings. The top 4 floors hopefully will be open. I think they close on April 7th. And it's going to be a senior assisted living development with over 100 units for seniors, which is the best kind of tenant you can have for either residential or economic development. So we're real excited about that because the other corners, which there are 5 corners, I believe, is MB Bank
Currency exchange.
and
So you have Walgreens,
Walgreens.
and then you have, I think, is it Rainbow?
Rainbow Shoes. Exactly.
Will there be amenities within those 4 floors?
Yes. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but it'll cater to some of them.
So typically with a lot of the Latino communities, especially Mexican communities, it's a very young population. So are any of your organizations dealing directly with or working with organizations that are dealing not only with the younger kids, but then also afterwards, if you can say something about the 18 to 24-year-olds? What's happening with them?
Well, there's great work that's happening in backyards that has been happening is with a formal group known as the Peace and Education Coalition, and we're trying to figure out how to in that age bracket, 18 to 24, quote unquote at risk, quote unquote at high risk, and trying to figure out how to engage them. I know that there's an annual youth summit focused on peace that's coming up later this month that we're kind of partnering with and figuring out how to be engaged with. But it's a big demographic that I feel we don't engage enough. We have to get young people involved in their communities, hook them up with meaningful service learning opportunities, teaching them that they can get involved and transform their neighborhoods. So it's something in our area of safety and violence prevention, intervention, and reduction. We're trying to figure out how to work with those young people, because those young people have, at the end of the day, they're the ones that have the power to stop the violence. They have the power to transform their communities. They have the power to register to vote when they're 18. And so we have to continue to engage them. And that Peace and Education Coalition is really trying to figure out how to do this effectively. So we're excited about that part.
They also run 2 alternative high schools in the community, which gives an opportunity for a lot of kids who have dropped off for one reason or the other to come back to school. And it's not a GED, it's a regular diploma. And some of those kids also, in addition to the youth summit that they have every year, there's also a fundraising event that's held every May. And scholarships are given to those kids to go back to college, go to college. Every year it could raise anywhere between $50,000 to $80,000, and all that money all goes towards scholarships. So all these kids that are encouraged to go to college are also being supported by Peace and Education in some way, form, or the other.
So it sounds like there's a lot of, I'm from back of the arts, born and raised, but I hear like a lot of activities, a lot of coalitions happening. What do you think, or what have you seen that has worked with like retaining people and like eliminating like isolation? So I think that's like something that is really prominent in the community as far as like families, because of like fear of violence and foreclosure, right? You can have like one family and then like 3 houses with no one living there, and then summer comes and no one wants to go outside. So what do you think is missing? What's the missing piece to fighting isolation?
I'm going to ask what people like you are breaking down that isolation issue. As the population of our community grows with college-educated people that are going to school and want to come back and give back, there are more and more of those kids. We have a Ballet Folklorica, which is a dance program in our organization. We have about 250 to 300 kids a year. As I see it get older and older, and more of our kids graduate, they're all coming back, and they all want to do something. They participated in lacrosse with Father Bruce, they participated in the Resurrection Project, they're participating in the Get Out and Vote. It's, I think you can structure as many programs as you want about that, but that's a community-led initiative. And it's going to take more and more kids, more and more adults to take back their streets. The community's got to take back their streets. They have to create, and come to the things that we provide, of course, but it's people like you that come on, go back, do what they're supposed to do, go back to their high school, back to their grammar school, talk to their teachers and their kids. And you're an example, you're a mentor. I know that sounds a little schmaltzy, but it's true.
And then the other thing too is, I must have been a sociologist in a past life, because you find out that a lot of the issues in the community are a direct reflection of what's happening systematically. And so I think that a lot of people in communities like Back to the Yards, it's amazing how, we talked about this point earlier about how politically divided it is. We have 5 different wards, we have 3 different House districts, we have 2 different Senate districts, 3 different congressional districts, and it feels like it's almost as if like somebody took Back to the Yards and just chopped it up in a bunch of pieces so that people could never have a collective voice. And so that is something that I think trickles down, right? If the larger political structure doesn't allow for people to unite and come together, then it's kind of up to us and the next generation of young people to really go on the block and talk to neighbors and get the ball rolling, But it trickles down. I think a lot of the issues that are taking place in Back in the Yards is a reflection of what's happening in the larger society.
if I may, I don't mean to be cynical, but to, the expression to Victor go the spoils, we never really had a Hispanic alderman that represented any portion of the back of the yards. We are guaranteed to have one after April 7th. The 15th ward will have one or two Hispanic gentlemen as their new alderman. When you don't have access to the map room and the new wards are being drawn, then you're left out. You're left out of the picture. If someone isn't there fighting for that community to say, no, we don't want, we want this, they're like all the other powerful and predominant aldermen were able to do. And so that's one really encouraging aspect of it. Whatever political side you're on, that should be addressed in, what is it, 8 years now when the next census takes place? 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years, sorry. That happened fast.
Didn't it though?
And same thing for the state rep and the state senate. You have to have people that are in the room that are concerned about that community and draw them back where it's fair and equal.
What year was it gerrymandered to the point where you had five wards?
Oh, it's been like that for a long time.
Long time.
Before this recent census,
Yeah.
it was before that.
I mean, 20, 30, 40 years, 50? You think it's a really long time or not recent?
No, well, probably because, you had the 14th ward and at one point it had more of the 11th ward and more of the 12th ward. So probably at least 20 years. Do you think?
How many did you say?
30 or 40 years. And it only changes every 10 years. So you get one opportunity every 10 years to change it.
It definitely sounds gerrymandered, but intentionally so.
And, and let's not forget the demographics have shifted such that the African American population is diminished. And that's why the only reason we have the 15th ward being led by Hispanic. And so, if that trend continues, who knows what it will look like the next time.
I have an NHS question. So NHS and neighborhood planning services are really vitally important to stabilizing housing in Black communities. And NHS is in a number of communities, yet still there's that number, 31% foreclosure rate. That's kind of a little bit alarming. So my question is there some sort of disconnect between sort of whether or not, what are the issues that prevent you from preventing more foreclosures and having better outcomes with housing?
I would say the main reason is information. You'd be surprised how many people have come to us for help because they're in foreclosure after they're on 8, 9, 10 months into it because they never knew we existed. Organizations like ours existed because there's other organizations like TRP, there's Writers Park CDC, there's so many, Bright Neighborhood Council, so many that do foreclosure outreach. You always have to look for a HUD certified counselor, somebody who's approved by HUD to be able to do that. You can easily go to the HUD.gov website and find a list. People don't know how to do that. There's not enough outreach out there for them so that people know where to turn to. There's resources out there for everything, I always say. It's just knowing where to go. On the other hand, is once you get them, they come in with all these preconceived notions. I mean, oh, I'm going to get thrown out of my house when my neighbor said, my cousin said. No, I always say, if something aches in your body, do you go to your neighbor and ask him what it is, or do you go to a doctor? You go to someone who knows. You don't just go to, what do you think it is? No. Yeah, because we're not there. But it's like, it's getting that information out there. That's one of the biggest challenges as nonprofits. There is no money for having this huge advertising campaign, which along the same lines, there's a lot of people out there that are advertising, and they'll guarantee you a loan modification for X amount of dollars. We have those people coming into us also. Well, I paid so and so, 5, 6 months ago, and nothing's been done. Well, they took your money, actually. Basically, how they did. Because the same services that they claim and guarantee that they're going to provide for you doesn't cost you anything. We got to remember that this has been a nationwide epidemic. Foreclosures are an epidemic. Though I always say that's the cancer that's eating away at our communities. And there's, of course, the federal government reacted. There's the Making Home Affordable program. You don't have to be behind on payments to get home. You just have to show a hardship. People don't know that. People are not familiar with that. Oh, so-and-so told me I have to miss 3 payments so I can get help. No, They're gonna evaluate your whole financial situation. And just because you're 3 months behind doesn't mean you're gonna get it. If you could have made your payments, just didn't, because you just wanted to be behind. You know, so there's a lot of things that go into it. I think getting that information out is one of our biggest challenges.
It's also, are there any barriers to sort of the utilization of the lending services? I know, don't you have to see like a HUD certified housing counselor before you can become eligible for some of the loan products and things like that?
No, basically, well, all that we ask is, basically, because we don't base our loans on the interest rate. You know, you're gonna get the same interest rate regardless of your credit score. We're gonna base it on your affordability, can you really afford this loan? And basically, all we ask is that you take a first-time buyer class, so that you are informed as a purchaser of what you're getting into. You'd be surprised how many people buy a home and don't know that they have to pay a water bill every 6 months to the county, to the city. They just don't know that. Well, what is this? That's your water bill, I don't know how to pay water. Nobody told me. Well, yeah, your realtor should have told you, your lender should have told you, somebody should have told you. But it'd be surprised how much lack of information is out there. Getting the word out, and reaching out to people, that's probably one of the hardest things that we encounter. I myself, like I said, I live in back of the yards because all the time I spend it because I go to different meetings, just to try to get that word out, because that's, word of mouth is probably the best form of advertisement. Other than that, we just got a grant, we have a few billboards around the city, but that's not gonna last for a long time, So, once that contract is up, that's it. So it's just constantly getting the message out there. And if you got communities like back of the yards where you have a lot of turnover, people move in, as Henry said, they make a little money, then maybe they move out. Now you get another influx of people. You got to constantly get that message out there. Hey, we're right in the corner, 47th and 100. You need help, come see us. And I get people there just coming in and say, "Can you translate that letter for me?" And not housing related, but they have that confidence to go there. That makes me feel good. That at least they confide in us enough to come and say, "Yeah, can you help me?" And my staff is great. It's all fully valuable staff, and they can help out. So it's Craig. He has fully valuable staff, and anybody that comes in for any type of service, we're off the time getting people confused. They come to us and they want it then, they go to them, they want us. Because we're like
Right down the street.
right down the street from each other.
So you feel that you have sort of the capacity to do more, if more people realize what sort of services you provide? Because you mentioned, this is a huge epidemic. But do you think that the organization has the capacity?
Right now we
to do
have,
more?
I always say there's never enough, but we have 9 offices. We have 7 in the city, 1 in Elgin, which services Elgin, the county of Kane, and we have 1 in the south suburbs in East Hazel Crest that services all the southern villages down there. Total of about 120 employees. So we have a large number. It's a large organization, but I always say there's never enough time, there's never enough outreach, because the problem is huge. It's huge. But if we can just get the information out there, it doesn't have to be us. There's other organizations that are there to help as well. And they have the same issues as us. One time there was the Housing Collaborative, which is all these organizations coming together and trying to get that message out, because it's an epidemic. It's an epidemic.
I think it's safe to say that low-income communities are the slowest or the last to recover from a bad economy or a recession, and that's unfortunately true in our case. Also, I don't know, but it's because it's the first time in my lifetime, how long will it take to recover from predatory lending, from bad loans, and people that had credit that shouldn't have? Even if it wasn't predatory, you got a loan you should have got. It's maybe even a generational thing. I hope not, but we'll all learn it together, I think.
And even fraud, there's been mortgage fraud in the community. Like 5 years ago, we noticed a lot of fraudulent purchases in the community between back of the yards and West End. There was homes being bought for $350,000 in that area, when the average house was maybe $70,000, $80,000 at the time. So it's like, okay, I don't care if it's got a swimming pool and tennis court in it, it's not worth $350,000 in this area, So you go check out the property and there's no way it's worth $350,000. So we started noticing that pattern, and so we reported it to HUD. HUD came out and investigated. Federal Bureau of Investigation got involved, FBI. Long story short, there was about maybe 25 properties at that one time that were involved in this whole scheme. So there were diamonds that came down the line, maybe 2 years ago, and year, last year, as a matter of fact. 10 people were indicted, and they were loan officers, they were title people, they were attorneys, there was a host, scheme of people, they were doing this. And they, they purchased a house for little money, borrow against it, walk away with the money and never make one payment. So now, again, this house sits vacant in the community for X amount of years until this whole trial goes through and everything. And now the bank takes it back and tries to get rid of it and tries to get it funded. It's just counterproductive to what we do. So those are issues that we always have. And it goes to your question, how can you prevent more foreclosures? Well, if it was just the foreclosures itself, it would be great, but there's all these other issues also involved.
Do we have any other questions, especially from the residents or big people with family in the back there? Any comments?
I have a question. You mentioned about high school or school like parents can work children at home food. So what's the size? Like is it small community schools or?
It's a little complicated because a certain portion or population of the school is held for international baccalaureate students. The average class size is going to be about 250 to 275. And I think about 90 of those seats are being held for international baccalaureate students, which is a competitive selective enrollment process. But the balance will be left open for the community schools, for community students, students that live in the community and want to go there. Thus far, we have not had the need for a lottery, but as the school grows in reputation, I believe that day is coming, and it may be next year. But for the most part, most kids that wanted to go to that school that lived in the neighborhood were able to get in. And so I think when it's fully at full capacity, it'll be about 1,200 students.
I think this is super good because it might be a center for parents and community neighborhood and also students, and maybe you can have some events like when they can have class there, so they can communicate there, I think.
And she makes the school open to the community, and it's getting more notice now and more popular now, so I think it's near the vital growth. It is a great community center, and that's what it was always intended to be, a community resource and an asset. But, first she has to establish academics and how she's beginning to open it up to the public. The fact that there's a library there, a public library, draws more people from the community there as well, so it's a great asset, best asset that we have.
And they have a great soccer team, which right now is just freshman and sophomore, wait till they get to varsity. You'll see.
That'll be a job. Would each of you like to make a closing set of comments? I guess we'll go in reverse order, maybe.
Sure. So we know that there's a strong perseverance in back of the yards, and that is always going to be there, I think. Two of the things to look out for, looking forward in our work in back of the yards, is I want to give a shout out to our housing department. We have over 60 units available for rent. If you know anybody, refer to the Resurrection Project. We have 60 units in back of the yards. If they want quality, affordable, decent, fair, and beautiful units to rent, they can always come to us for support and help. And the other thing is, we have to encourage young people to come out and vote. I don't like politics, but the election should be decided by voters, not by people who don't turn out to vote. And so increasing voter turnout is important, not only in back of the yards, but in the city. And then also engaging youth in safety. And that's something that I look forward to when working in back of the yards.
And also, if you do decide to rent, tell them Henry sent you in no, back of the yards, it's a great community. Like I said before, I fell in love with the community. It has a lot of positive things, things that other communities wish they had. As a matter of fact, like I said before, living in Humboldt Park, there's a lot of things there that I don't see that are in back of the yards. And just the fact that all these organizations have come together and everybody's working towards the same goal is fantastic. It's a great community to work in from that perspective because of that. It just makes my job a lot easier. Our again, I don't just focus on housing, I get involved in a lot of other issues. It's probably ought to, because you just can't say, oh, I'm just involved with this one issue and that's it. No, you gotta get involved in the community. Unity is part of that word community, right? So you all work together, you all work towards that same goal. It's a fantastic community. If you ever have a chance to go by, you just have lunch or whatever, one of the restaurants, it's great. It's easy to get to. I encourage you also in June, 12th, 13th, 14th. I'm going to give a shout out for Craig. Fiesta Back of the Years, it happens every year. Over 300,000 people. You hear about Fiesta del Sol. This is a mini Fiesta del Sol. It's a Back of the Years Fiesta, and it's fantastic. You come out here and you have a lot of fun. There's rides, there's food, there's entertainment, there's everything that you want in a festival. And you really get a feel for what the community is. A couple of years ago, we partnered on a branding pilot program. We had a logo for Back of the Yards. And the people that did the logo for us came out during the fiestas and took a lot of pictures, and they just commented. They're from North Carolina. They had no clue what they were getting into. So when they saw that and they felt it, they just commented. The comments were so positive about how culturally diverse and how great it felt, which is great when you hear that. And they designed the logo for us. And again, if you have a chance, June, come on.
Seriously, I hope you do come out, because we combat, one of the things we combat is the perception of violence in our community. I'm not going to kid you, we do have issues with gangs, but we're dealing with it on all fronts, from education to law enforcement to housing to economic development. Everything's connected. So I hope you do come out and see. It's the safest event you're going to go to in the city, unfortunately, because there's so many police, partly. But it is a great opportunity. And one thing I wish I could communicate to you and articulate to you is the impact and the influence the Back of the Yards has had on the city and state and country. I can't even begin to gather the numbers of people that have gotten their roots and that have got their foundation in the Back of the Yards. So many Irish, German, Polish, and Mexican, and African American families got their start from the Back of the Yards because there was work there, because it was the Ellis Island of the Midwest. Someday that's going to be my project when I retire. But the impact that this community has had on the lives of so many is really worth noting. And the last thing I want to say is that the future of the community can usually be told by its educational prospects. We have 6 grammar schools, as I mentioned earlier, and our kids deal with 3 issues that are probably a little unique to them, and that is that about 100% of them qualify for free lunch, which means that they qualify, they're in the poverty range. Probably 90% of them speak English as a second language, okay? And then the violence issue, which a lot of communities deal with, but our kids have to deal with that trifecta, if you will, and yet they persevered, and yet they are thriving. There wasn't even a talk of, well, this is a population issue, there wasn't even talk of closure of any of the schools in our community because they were at maximum population or overcrowded. But more importantly, they're all trending upward. We have 6, you may not agree with me, everyone, if you've met all this, but we have 6 committed principals. And the county and the community holds them accountable. A great high school principal. We have great families now that recognize the value, as I've seen in this room with some of you. The value of education is becoming increasingly more important to our families. So if that's going to be our telltale sign to the future, I'm very encouraged. Thank you.
So now on June 12th, 13th, and 14th, we will go where exactly?
You'll be on 47th Street between Ashland and Damon. You probably should take public transportation. And just look for me, there'll be a VIP tent, there'll be a beer. Or three.
We're there.
And
We're
free
there.
time, or whatever.
All right, 47th Street, okay. Great Chico, Emilio Carrasquillo, and Henry Cervantes. Muchísimas gracias. This was really, really wonderful. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
God bless you.